Today on the program, AAPL, Apple, and what its earnings might tell us. Also, a special guest for WIJYT. What is Janet Yellen thinking? From American Public Media, this is Marketplace. In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Rizdal. Great to have you here on this Tuesday, everybody. It's the 26th of January. Sure, we could talk stocks or oil or the general volatility of late in the global markets, but you know what? The way things are going, we are going to have plenty of chances to do that. So today, some corporate news from the most valuable and arguably the most influential company on the planet. Apple reported profits today after the bell, profits over which there was, even before they came out, much wailing and gnashing of teeth. The headline goes like this: they sold a touch fewer iPhones than people had been guessing, made a hair less money than people had thought they might. Still gajillions of dollars, by the way. But that is not the whole story, never is. So for some context, we got our senior tech correspondent, Molly Wood, on the line for a chat live. Hey, Molly.
Hey, Kai, how are you?
I'm good. So why all the wailing and gnashing of teeth over this particular earnings report here?
I think, well, the wailing is largely because Apple did report its slowest growth in iPhone sales since the phone came out.
And
so
we
there's
knew it was
concern.
coming. Yeah.
We knew that was coming. Exactly. That was not a surprise. And there's concern that Apple really is becoming a one-trick pony. That iPhone makes up about 68% of their sales. And so the question is, what are they going to do in the future as the market for smartphones gets more and more saturated? Chinese demand is waning. And Apple has always been a company about huge margins and huge sales. And so are they going to ride this pony forever?
All right, so I'm reading it here, though. I mean, revenue was like $76-something billion. That is a boatload of cash. What are people's real problems with this company then?
It is. I believe it's like the record corporate profits in a quarter ever. The problem, though, like I said, is the future and the question of whether Apple can effectively diversify. Their tablet sales have been declining for the last 2 years. They've had a mixed track record with services like Apple Music, Apple TV, not the next billion-dollar business. Mm-hmm. And the Apple Watch is doing well, but it's tied to the iPhone. So the question is, can Apple stay in consumer electronics forever and continue to make the crazy margins that they've made as price pressure on smartphones starts to demand cheaper products and lower margins? And will they become a value stock and not a growth stock?
Well, you had a great conversation this morning with David Brancaccio in the Morning Report, and I want to go into that for a minute because there is an investor mindset here, right, that revolves around the kind of company that Apple is becoming, value or growth.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And investors hate a steady course. So Apple could cheerfully make billions of dollars selling phones and watches and iPads for the next decade, potentially. Right. But that's not going to give them. I mean, this is a company that in 2012 had 46% margins. Yeah. Investors really want to see that continue.
Yeah. So what are they doing? I want my Apple TV. I want my Apple car. What else is out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's considered an open secret in the Valley that they are working on an electric car, but that takes time. And the reported head of the project apparently just left the company. They're starting to dabble in virtual reality. They just this week hired an expert in VR, and they put out a virtual reality video in October. Of course, it was a U2 concert, but it was a start. We're still waiting for Apple's big move into the connected home. That's taking a really long time, but that's potentially another great revenue stream for them. It just seems like Apple feels, and maybe rightly, given their pile of cash, that they have all the time in the world.
Talk to me for a second about that pile of cash. $200 billion, a lot of it's overseas, not going to bring it home for tax reasons. They could do almost anything they wanted with almost no real risk present day.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Apple is their massive war chest of patent filings also. Yeah. So, I think it's really just a matter of them deciding where to spend that money and then making it happen.
Molly Wood, she is our senior tech correspondent. The numbers from Apple today, good, maybe not good enough. We'll see. Molly, thanks a bunch.
My pleasure, Kai.
On Wall Street today, traders, even before Apple reported, were a pretty happy bunch. We will have the details when we do the numbers. Education, we learned once again today, is a business. The GED testing service, the best-known high school equivalency exam, says it's going to lower the passing score for the test retroactively for 2 years because customers. Other changes are coming as well. Marketplace's Nancy Marshall-Genzer has the story.
If you pass the GED, you get the equivalent of a high school diploma. The problem is people taking the GED had to clear a higher hurdle than the average high school student, according to C.T. Turner, a spokesman for GED testing service. He says lowering the passing score evens things out.
What it does, it is make sure that GED graduates are not held to a higher standard than the average high school graduate, and that we're not ahead of the curve, we're reflective of that curve.
Thing is, GED testing service is now a for-profit company, and it's facing competition from some new tests on the market. The GED was revamped in 2014 to reflect the Common Core standards for public schools. After that, fewer students passed the test.
There undoubtedly was some concern about losing market share to the other tests.
Emily Froimson is president of Gateway to College National Network, a nonprofit that helps people earn high school degrees. She says the GED is also more expensive than some of those competing tests. GED's C.T. Turner says the cost varies. He also says this isn't about competition.
This is about making adult learners successful.
And Turner says GED will designate the highest scorers as college ready, recommending they get to skip remedial courses and even get college credit. Michelle Asha Cooper is president of the Institute for Higher Education Policy. She says colleges would have to agree to that.
We have to remember that higher education has a role in this as well. They have the right to say yes or no, we will accept or we won't accept.
And Cooper says there's no guarantee they'll say yes. In Washington, I'm Nancy Marshall-Genzer for Marketplace.
The labor market in this country, as we tell you every first Friday of the month, continues to get tighter, meaning companies have to work even harder to find and hire the best talent. One employer having particular trouble competing? The federal government. Government salaries and benefits long ago lost their competitive edge. And Marketplace's Kimberly Adams reports from Washington it is not getting any better.
The Defense Department has already doubled the probation period for new employees to 2 years. Now, a bill moving through Congress would allow other federal agencies to do the same.
We think 1 year is too short, but we think 2 years is about the opportune time.
Thomas Berger is executive director of the Professional Managers Association. The group represents federal managers. Berger says they need more time to assess employees who have a lot of training early on. You know, jobs like air traffic controllers.
They get to see the finished product, and they get to go out and do evaluations on field visits with them.
But some argue a longer probation may not be the best way to make sure a new hire is the best fit. Max Steyer works with the Partnership for Public Service, which focuses on government efficiency.
It shouldn't really be about the length of the probationary period. The focus should be on, are we using it well to assess the talent and make sure that we have the right folk for the workforce.
Plus, the government is already having a tough time recruiting top talent. Lee Stone is with the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. He says government jobs used to strike a balance.
The employee is told, listen, in return for taking a job at below market rate for your salary, you have enhanced job stability and you have good benefits.
Now, he says, shrinking pensions, a growing pay gap with the private sector, and the almost annual shutdown threat undermine that deal. Stone says the long probation period is just another reason why people won't want to work for the feds. In Washington, I'm Kimberly Adams for Marketplace.
The Mariner S. Eccles building on Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C., the headquarters of the Federal Reserve, is busy today. Chair Yellen and the gang are in the middle of a two-day meeting, out of which absolutely nobody expects another interest rate increase. We are, however, going to pay real close attention to the Fed's statement tomorrow once they have wrapped things up. Tea leaf reading for the economically inclined, if you will. Mohammed El-Erian is one of those who's going to be paying close attention. He's a chief economic advisor at Allianz, which owns PIMCO, the giant bond fund which El-Erian used to run. He's also got a new book out. It's about central banks, the position they find themselves in now, and where things might go from here. It's called The Only Game in Town. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
You paint a fairly grim picture in the preamble to this book. You basically say things are going to get better or they're going to stay the same and get worse, and we're not sure which one yet.
Yeah, the key issue is that the path we're on right now is not sustainable, that it will end. But it's not clear what comes after that. There's nothing predestined. It's up to choices that are made in the next few months and years.
And central banks, you say, just to rip off your title here, are the only game in town. They're the ones that are going to figure this out for us, or that are going to control it, I guess.
So the only game in town in the sense that by necessity and not by choice, they were forced to carry almost the entirety of the policy burden since the global financial crisis. The problem with that is they have imperfect tools. So the best they can do is buy time for our politicians to step up to the plate and to enable other agencies that can deal with the problems at hand. Unfortunately, the political system hasn't responded, so that the central banks are now carrying too much of the burden. And at a certain point, they risk going from being part of the solution to part of the problem. And that is a major threat right now for the global economy.
Okay, so you say one of the things you want to do is reject financial engineering as a growth strategy, right? Reject what the big banks have been doing, reject the way we've been doing business in this global economy for years and years now. And my question then is this. You're a guy who can get Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase or Lloyd Blankfein at Goldman Sachs on the phone, right? And you can call them up and say, hey, guys, come on. This is bad for everybody else. You're having a great time, but it's bad for everybody else. Do you see them saying, right, you know what, Mohammed, you're absolutely correct. We're going to change how we do things.
So I don't think it's up to Jamie Dimon or Lloyd Blankfein and Goldman Sachs. I think it's up to society. We made a mistake. We made a mistake 10 to 15 years ago when we fell in love with finance as a growth engine. We fell in love with this notion that finance was the next level of capitalism. It was agricultural, then industry, then manufacturing services, and if you're really lucky, you get to financial services. And you saw countries compete to be the financial center. And we lost sight of what basically is important for growth, and that is investing in people, investing in infrastructure. So our love affair with romance came to a crashing end, but we haven't got a substitute as yet. And the longer we wait, the greater the cost, not just to this generations, but the next generations as well.
All right, so let's take it. Let's take a different tack here. Chairman Bernanke used to say all the time when he was testifying in front of Congress, he would say, fiscal policymakers need to do their thing. Legislatures need to do their part in this. And yet consistently, certainly in this country and in many others, national legislatures haven't. What do we do about that?
First, we need a wake-up call. I mean, part of the reason why I wrote this book is because I felt there was a need for a massive wake-up call. And it's reiterating not just what Chairman Bernanke said in what you just said, it's about fiscal agencies, it's about other agencies. But remember, when they went unconventional for economic reasons as opposed for market normalization reasons in 2010, Chairman Bernanke said it's about, quote, benefits, costs, and risks. And the longer you persist in this world, the greater the threat that the benefits go down and the costs and risks go up. It's about collateral damage. And we are at that point right now. The benefits are small, but the collateral damage is getting bigger.
So let me try something before I let you go. We do a thing on the broadcast every now and then. I usually do it with CEOs, and I ask them to describe what their company does in 5 words or less. But recently I've taken to asking guests on this program what they think Janet Yellen is thinking in 5 words or less. So given the past 3 weeks in this economy, right, since the beginning of the year, what do we think Janet Yellen is thinking right now? 5 words or less.
Cloudy outlook, data-dependent policy.
Data-dependent. That's the thing everybody always forgets with her. She always says data-dependent, right?
And she is data-dependent. And I think she's right. This is, to use another Bernanke phrase, an unusually uncertain outlook. Not just uncertain, unusually uncertain. So you've got to be open to all the incoming data, and you've got to continue to evolve your understanding of what's going on.
The new book from Mohammed El-Erian is called The Only Game in Town. Mohammed, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Coming up,
every single state has stressed zones.
Water as a business opportunity. But first, let's do the numbers. The Dow Industrial is up 282 points today, 1.75%, closed at 16,167. Did the blue chips? The Nasdaq delivered 49 points, 1%, 45.67. The S&P 500 up 26 points, about 1.4%, 1903, the number there. We told you about Apple earlier, so we're not going to go over that again. In the rest of the tech world, Alphabet, a.k.a. Google, was flat. Facebook up 1/3%. Twitter continued to sputter, down another fraction of a percent today. Can you say volatile oil market? Sure. I knew you could. Yesterday, oil drove energy stocks down. Today, it was a different story after hints that OPEC and other producers might reach a deal to cut production and then, in theory, get prices higher. Chevron pumped up 3.2% on that news. Royal Dutch Shell boosted 2.4%. Bonds up just a hair. The yield on the 10-year T-note, 1.99%. You're listening to Marketplace. This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Ryssdal. One of the weak spots in the global economy, and believe you me, there are plenty of them, revealed exactly how weak it is today. Russia announced its economy shrank by 3.7% for all of 2015. Oleg Boldarev is the BBC's correspondent in Moscow, which is where we reached him. Oleg, good to speak with you.
Hello.
Tell me what it feels like out in the streets now that the official numbers are out on the Russian economy. What are people saying?
Well, the street is pretty much the way it was yesterday, but yes, the Russians are getting depressed. I think the more sure way to get depressed in Russia is not to look at the GDP, but rather, take a look at those boards which announced the dollar to ruble exchange rates. The last week on Thursday, Russian ruble set a record low. It fell to 86 to a single dollar. It wasn't like that since 1998. Russians know there is a crisis, but they also know this is not something spectacular and single kind of event.
So they're used to it then? It sort of sounds like that's what you're saying.
They've got a refresher in currency collapse a year ago when the ruble first showed his new weaknesses, and everyone was talking about crisis for the past 12 months. I've seen various polls, and one of them looks like one of those brochures advertising alpine skiing. So you got three curves, all of them going down with various kind of steepness. And the steepest one is the expectations. That's where the Russians are most pessimistic. Everyone knows that things will get worse. And this parameter is deepening with every passing month.
You've got falling oil prices. You've got Western sanctions to some degree. What else is there that's making this happen?
I think oil is the main player. Just over the last summer, they were asking whether sanctions are having an impact. And a lot of experts I talked to said that they came very useful to the Russian government because they allowed President Putin to find an external point of blame to say this is what the sanctions did to the Russian economy. But the immediate correlation between cheap oil and ruble became very obvious in the last months of 2015. Russia is depending on oil. Despite so many years of talking about trying to wean the budget off the hydrocarbons, they're still defining the state revenues.
President Putin came out this morning and basically said, we're going to be all right. We're going to rectify current conditions. Is he getting any blame for this? Any political blowback at all?
Oh, no, not at all. I think it's the government, it's the central bank. One particular minister stands out. It's the Minister for the Economic Development, Mr. Ulyukayev, who spent much of last year saying that this is the bottom. We will go up now. And just as he would say that, another downturn was just around the corner. I think Mr. Ulyukayev is getting more careful now. Mr. Putin says things will become better, but as I said, everyone knows they're in this for a long time. The majority of Russian polled say this is at least 2 years. Of course, what do they know?
Oleg Boldarev is the BBC's correspondent in Moscow. Oleg, thanks very much.
Thank you.
The news out of Flint, Michigan today goes like this. They're about to get water by the truckload, 175 truckloads, in fact. Walmart, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, and Nestle all said today they are donating a combined 6.5 million bottles of water to school children there. Should be enough to last them the rest of the calendar year. Elsewhere in the American water economy, Congress has decided to spend a big chunk of money on pollution cleanup in the Great Lakes to keep them healthy and to keep them economically relevant. The Great Lakes Basin is one of the most water-rich places in the world, but the challenge of late has been how to turn those water riches into actual riches. Sarah Gardner looked into this notion of a water economy.
10 years ago, John Austin started asking the question, what would be the economic impact of cleaning up the Great Lakes? After 2 years, Austin and his colleagues at Brookings came up with an answer.
If you restore water, if you clean it, and if you reconnect to it, it's a huge economic development engine.
An engine worth $50 to $80 billion, they figured. If water had powered the industrial economy, why couldn't it power a modern economy as well? Everything from lakefront tourism to new technology that cleans or saves water. Nowhere are they testing the idea of a water tech economy more urgently than Milwaukee. Dean Amhouse is president and CEO of a trade group here called the Water Council. It's headquartered in a renovated warehouse just off the Menominee River, a waterway central to the city's industrial history. The ambitiously named Global Water Center anchors the development.
So we have 17 acres that could handle about 1 million square feet of businesses here.
Milwaukee is developing a large cluster of companies devoted to solving the world's water woes. Amhouse says they're building on expertise that's been here for decades, the companies that serviced beer makers and other industrial water users.
So those big, large breweries, many of them gone away, but the suppliers continue to grow and develop. And these are the ones that are making the pumps, valves, meters, pipes, fixtures, all of those gadgets.
Companies that know how to move and measure water, like Badger Meter, a company that's been around since Teddy Roosevelt was president. Back then, it was selling frost-proof water meters to utilities. Today, it's selling them wireless meters that connect to your smartphone so you can monitor your water use in real time. Vice President of Engineering, Fred Begale.
Hundreds of utilities that we typically would not have had as customers coming to us now. California, Arizona, Nevada, those are the hot spots, as well as Texas.
Drought is also driving business for startups here, like WellIntel. It's making a device the size of a food processor that lets farmers and others monitor their groundwater levels online. And again, in real time. Co-founder Nick Hayes.
California is important. 70% of what we've shipped has landed in California. But it should also be said that every single state has stressed zones.
So you have a water-rich region selling solutions to the water-starved and the water-polluted. This city has a lot of experience with dirty water, says historian John Gerda. Gerda is standing on the banks of the Milwaukee River, now lined with high-priced condos. But a century ago, tanneries here used the river as a garbage dump.
So you have all the waste from the tanneries and the sewage from upstream and the city proper kind of sitting here, and on a hot day, this stuff would just sit here and cook.
Good riddance to that kind of pollution, but this new water tech industry can't replace the manufacturing base those polluters created. Tens of thousands of factory jobs are long gone, and Milwaukee is one of the poorest cities in the country because of it.
I don't think it will be Alice Chalmers. I doubt there will be 20,000 jobs based on water, but I think it will be an important addition to the 21st century economy.
There are those who dream of a Silicon Valley of water here, fueled by entrepreneurs and PhDs from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee's School of Freshwater Sciences. But Silicon Valley also has no shortage of high-flying investors. Leon Cheptitsky, head of Stanford's Water in the West program, says water has yet to attract that kind of money.
Water's just cheap, which means that there's low incentives for efficiency. And then given the low price of water and the capital-intensive nature of the sector, it's hard to generate huge returns on investment.
If water weren't so cheap, with prices based on supply and demand, Great Lakes champion John Austin says that could spur a Great Lakes boom of sorts, a boom of Southwesterners moving to where the water is. I'm Sarah Gardner for Marketplace.
This final note on the way out today, another data point about the all-important American housing market. Zillow, the real estate guesstimate people, are out with some new research that shows homes within a mile of a Trader Joe's or a Whole Foods are worth twice as much as the median home in the rest of the country. If you own a home and a Trader Joe's opens nearby, look for a 10% bump the first 2 years it's open. Of course, there's probably a whole lot of other things that go into a value of a home near a Trader Joe's or a Whole Foods. Do I need to lay that out? No. All righty, we're out of here. The Dow up 282 points today, 1.75%. The NASDAQ up 49 points, 1%. The S&P 500 gained 26 points, 1.4%. Caitlin Esch is the producer on our Wealth and Poverty Desk. Our digital producer is Tony Wagner. The senior digital producer is Nishat Kurwa. I'm Kai Rizdal. We will see you tomorrow, everybody. This is APM.